The following is a fan-made review show. These are not official reviews, nor commissioned, nor monetized videos. All works are featured on this channel are properties of their respective owners. Please support the official releases.
This is probably the most conflicted I've ever been about an anime in quite some time. And believe me, I've seen some terrible shit over the past few years. But this one really takes the cake. I know I was going to do triad checks in this video, but believe me, it's still coming. As proof, I have the script right here. So don't worry about that. It's coming. But I really need to get my voice out on this one. ReZero on paper sounds like a show I would eat up. A high-concept fantasy that's not afraid to get violent when the shit hits the fan. Except, I cannot enjoy it. And it's because of the main character. The show had a lot going for it, and as I was watching it week by week after I marathoned up to episode 15, I wasn't invested as I should have been. And believe me, this show had everything I would have wanted in a fantasy show. I can describe this show best if you took the time-resetting and gritty violence from All You Need Is Kill, combined it with the taxing mental anguish of failure from Steins Gate, and presented from the point of view of a gamer otaku archetype who was transported into a fantasy world, and was complete and utter asshat that you absolutely hate him by the end of it, and you would get this show. And believe me, I would eat this show up, because it gets a lot of these things right. But for every action set piece, every new side character, and every piece of information the show decides to give us, I couldn't bring myself to enjoy it, because it deliberately sets itself back with every so-called arc, and I can't forgive it for that. Now, let me explain. The story follows Subaru Natsuki as he's suddenly transported into a high-concept fantasy setting with no explanation as to how or why he was summoned there. Initially happy with his new life, he is mugged almost as soon as he steps foot into a dark alley, only to be saved by a silver-haired girl looking around town for her insignia. After bonding with her, Subaru and the girl end up tracking the insignia down in the slums, only to be killed by an unknown figure. Vowing to save the girl at any cost, he suddenly comes to the realization that he has a power to be transported back in time prior to their deaths, which he dubs Return by Death. A power that allows him to seemingly travel back in time whenever he is killed, retaining the memories of the past. Using this power combined with his steady determination, Subaru is now on a mission to save this girl's life at any cost. Although the concept, synopsis, and the overall world of the show are executed in an interesting way, it doesn't make up for the main character's stubbornness to achieve his goals, which initially start off as noble, but later become selfish and self-serving, trying to pass itself off as selfless, often relying on cheap character deaths to keep the plot moving. Most of the story arcs are laced in mysteries that the viewer cannot possibly solve without prior knowledge, or an extremely keen eye for detail, with character motivations slowly progressing forward into oblivion. It's hard to make a case for this show since it's a grueling task to sit through even the most simplest of arcs. Made worse with the light novel protagonist trope character who must try to save everyone and ends up succeeding with the most half-baked plans you can possibly imagine. ReZero tries to take a different approach, often letting the main characters work for their good ending through trial and error, which leaves them all dead or at the very least on the verge of mental breakdown, and even then that hardly stops them. There's an episode where Subaru literally breaks out of a state of temporary insanity in a fit of intense anger. Part of me admires the persistence of our main character, but I can't relate to that level of determination. It becomes such an extreme that other characters call him out on his self-serving determination, often resulting in the guy getting beat up. And all these characters got salient points, but the main reason I want to know is why. Why is Subaru so attached to this girl? With the knowledge and everything he knows, and especially with his ability, he could reasonably live a happy life. But no, instead, he just decides to trek through all this shit, and for what? Maintaining his relationship with his waifus? When you really break it down, Subaru is becoming both a psychopath and an outright sociopath, simultaneously in his pursuit to protect Amelia. This is the guy that we as the audience are supposed to relate to, since he's literally experiencing the events as they unfold, and we as the viewer are experiencing all these events through his eyes and perspective. This is one of many things ReZero does right. From the very first episode, we see Subaru learn little things that help build the world that he's in and come to understand it as a whole. Every bit of information he learns, we learn with him as well. This serves as a double-edged sword when applied to the story arcs, since we experience almost everything through the eyes of Subaru and not through any one specific character in particular. Save for some characters' backstories, we hardly have any set precedent of any objective truths or facts outside of Subaru's line of questioning or what he knows already thus far. This just makes him, as well as the audience, more prone to think that the universe is taking a collective shit on everything he cares about. But really, it's just bad storytelling. Based on his power and the limitations it brings on him as an individual, it borders on the level of insanity. So I did some digging around in psychology. I eventually found an article from Psychology Today titled "The Definition of Insanity Is," and in this article, it brings to light the term insanity as well as the difference between perseverance and preservation, while breaking down the saying the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results, which in this case seems pretty apt. The article classifies preservation as the pathological persistence of the word, gesture, or act, and perseverance as a steady persistence in a course of action despite difficulties, obstacles, or discouragement. Now, keep this in mind. I called Subaru's actions in this series noble to a point, and operating in the logic of this article within the confines of the first arc of this series when he was still a decent person, he was persevering against the odds, fighting a force that was unknown to him in a world that he has little to no bearing on and with an ability he barely understands. Towards the later arcs, he is trying to preserve Amelia through the gesture of trying to save her and failing every step of the way, thinking of her less as a person and more of a goal. But he's just prolonging the inevitable. No matter how many times he saves Amelia or Rem or whoever, no matter how many times he prevents it, there's always some other force that just kills them anyway. So I have to say this and call this a question again. Is this chick even worth it? Obviously I don't. After thinking about what I would do personally if I were put in that situation, it became apparent that I didn't want to die repeatedly while damaging my psyche. It's a given how the first arc played out. It would be the moment that Subaru noticed that he died again despite going through all that trouble to save Amelia after that first arc would be the exact place where I would have said, fuck this, I'm out. There is nothing tying me down from doing such a thing aside from a moral obligation. After all, Subaru retains his memories, so there is literally nothing stopping him from jumping ship and living a natural, happy life that he would actually enjoy. This is something they brought in the light novels, and a bit of it went into the anime, but unless you truly think that dying through multiple timelines is ultimately worth it, be my guest, but the self-satisfaction is overwhelmingly negated by the fact that you had to die multiple times in order to achieve anything you want. Hell, if you want self-gratification, might as well just masturbate. It isn't that hard. Thing is, I've seen this kind of thing happen before when a series presents us with a wimpy little turd like Subaru in Future Diary. The series in that case gave us Yuki, a completely incompetent character that had some level of naivety to make the guy somewhat relatable to put up against the frantic and disastrous setting and the equally fucked up characters. But as soon as Yuki goes off the deep end and becomes a psychotic asshole, killing his friends and innocent people along the way, and all of a sudden we're supposed to wish for a happy ending for this guy? Fuck off! The terrorist who tries to blow up a school and murders people on a consistent basis, and who is directly framed as a victim in Yuki's destructive rampage, is more relatable than the supposed hero than we're supposed to be rooting for. And how could you? You'd be rooting for a character who turned into a psychopath on the dime because the plot says so, and now he's an irredeemable asshole. Now apply that to ReZero. As much as the series has a lot going for it, I hate character portrayals that depict the main character's lowest point by being reprehensive and impulsive assholes and expect the viewer to just brush it off, pretend like it didn't happen, and frame it like these newfound fuckwads deserve a happy ending. It's as disruptive and far removing as, say, creating a universe so shallow that no one can grasp anything until they're directly told with no room to speculate, or passing the series off as a mystery when the audiences have a firm enough understanding of the in-world concepts to even play along on the show's terms. It never brings anything new to the table, and it only serves to take me out of the story. Subaru is thoroughly unrelatable and quite possibly a psychopath at times. While you can definitely understand his motivations early on, and definitely can see where he's coming from in later episodes, his descent into madness isn't worth sitting through, considering that there's much more interesting things happening behind the scenes away from his knowledge. And if it's away from his reach, the show won't touch upon it until it directly affects him, which directly conflicts with the series' presentation and the flow of the story.